These are not horror movies. These are real cases that actually happened. Real people disappeared. Real families were murdered. And in some of these cases, the killers were never found. Tonight, you're about to hear 5 of the most disturbing real-life horror stories ever recorded. Stories so terrifying that some people still refuse to talk about them to this day. So turn off the lights, put your headphones on, and watch carefully. Because these stories are not for the faint-hearted. In February of 2013, one of the strangest and most terrifying mysteries on the internet shocked millions of people around the world. A young college student vanished without a trace inside a hotel already known for death, violence, and darkness. And days later, hotel guests unknowingly drank water from the same tank where her body was eventually discovered. But even today, people still ask the same terrifying question: what really happened to Elisa Lam? Because the final footage of her alive still doesn't make sense. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old student from Canada. She was intelligent, friendly, and loved traveling. In early 2013, she decided to take a solo trip across the United States. At first, everything seemed normal. She visited different cities, posted photos online, and stayed active on social media. Friends said she sounded excited about the trip. But eventually, Elisa arrived in downtown Los Angeles, and that decision would change everything. She checked into a place called the Cecil Hotel. Now, the Cecil Hotel already had a terrifying reputation long before Elisa arrived. The hotel had been connected to suicides, violent crimes, drug activity, and even serial killers. Some people believed the building itself carried dark energy. Others called it one of the most cursed hotels in America, but Elisa probably didn't know any of that. At first, nothing seemed unusual. She explored the city during the day, returned to the hotel at night, and continued posting updates online. But after a few days, her behavior reportedly started becoming strange. Hotel staff claimed Elisa was acting oddly around other guests. Eventually, management even moved her into a separate room. Then suddenly, she disappeared. No calls, no messages, no online activity. Her parents became worried immediately. Police searched the hotel, questioned employees, checked security footage. But there was no sign of Elisa anywhere. It was as if she had completely vanished inside the building. Then, investigators discovered something disturbing. A security camera inside one of the hotel elevators had captured Elisa shortly before she disappeared. The footage would later become one of the most horrifying viral videos ever uploaded online. At first, Elisa walks into the elevator normally. But seconds later, everything becomes strange. She presses multiple buttons rapidly. Then she steps into the hallway, looks around nervously, and suddenly jumps back inside. It almost looks like she's hiding from someone. Then she leans against the wall, waiting. But the elevator doors never close. Elisa continues peeking outside repeatedly. At one point, she begins making unusual hand movements in the hallway, almost like she's talking to someone nobody else can see, or reacting to something invisible. Then suddenly, she walks away, and that was the last time she was ever seen alive. The footage spread across the internet rapidly. Millions of people became obsessed with the mystery. Some believed Elisa was being chased, others believed she was suffering from paranoia, and some people became convinced something supernatural happened inside the Cecil Hotel that night. But days later, the case became even more horrifying. Guests staying inside the hotel started complaining about the water. They said it tasted strange. Some said the water pressure was weak. Others claimed the water smelled terrible. One guest later said the water coming from the shower looked dark. So hotel maintenance workers went to inspect the rooftop water tanks. What they discovered inside one of them shocked the entire world. Elisa Lam's body was floating inside the tank. The news instantly terrified people online, because for days, hotel guests had unknowingly used that water. But the biggest mystery still remained unsolved. How did Elisa get onto the roof? The rooftop doors were supposedly locked, and even more confusing, the water tank lids were extremely heavy. Police later claimed Elisa somehow entered the tank alone. Her death was officially ruled an accidental drowning. Investigators suggested she may have experienced mental health issues during the trip, but many people refused to believe the official explanation. Internet detectives began analyzing every second of the elevator footage. People noticed strange details. Some believed the video had been edited. Others pointed out the elevator doors behaved strangely. And conspiracy theories exploded everywhere online. Some connected the case to paranormal activity inside the hotel. Others believed someone inside the building knew more than they admitted. To this day, nobody fully agrees on what happened. And that's exactly why this case became legendary. Because the footage feels wrong. Even now, years later, people still watch the elevator video late at night, trying to understand Elisa's final moments, trying to figure out who, or what, she was reacting to. And perhaps the creepiest part of all is knowing that somewhere inside the Cecil Hotel, those dark hallways still exist. The same elevator still exists. And the mystery of Elisa Lam may never truly be solved. In January of 1947, Los Angeles became the center of one of the most horrifying unsolved murder cases in American history. A young woman with dreams of becoming a Hollywood star was found brutally murdered in an empty lot. But what terrified investigators the most wasn't just the crime scene. It was the fact that the killer seemed calm, organized, and possibly proud of what he had done. Even after decades of investigation, the Black Dahlia murder remains unsolved. And some people believe the real killer died without ever being exposed. Her real name was Elizabeth Short. She was only 22 years old. Friends described her as kind, quiet, and deeply fascinated with Hollywood glamour. She moved to California hoping for a better future. Like thousands of others during that time, she dreamed of becoming famous. But life in Los Angeles wasn't easy. Elizabeth struggled financially. She moved between apartments, stayed with friends, and spent time around nightclubs and restaurants. Still, nobody could have imagined the nightmare that was coming. On the morning of January 15th, a woman walking through a neighborhood noticed something strange in a vacant lot. At first, she thought it was a broken mannequin lying in the grass. But when she got closer, she froze in horror. It wasn't a mannequin. It was a human body. Police rushed to the scene immediately, and even experienced officers were disturbed by what they saw. Elizabeth Short had been murdered in an extremely brutal way. The crime scene looked carefully staged. Investigators quickly realized this wasn't a random attack. Whoever committed the murder had taken time arranging the body before leaving. And strangely, there was almost no blood at the scene, which meant Elizabeth was likely killed somewhere else first. News of the murder spread across America rapidly. Newspapers became obsessed with the case. That's when reporters gave Elizabeth the nickname the Black Dahlia. Soon the entire country became fascinated by the mystery. People followed every update, every rumor, every possible suspect. And there were many suspects. Doctors, military men, gangsters, actors, even police informants. At one point, more than 150 men were questioned, but none of them were officially charged. Then something even stranger happened. A newspaper office received a package in the mail. Inside were Elizabeth's personal belongings. The sender appeared to be mocking investigators, almost as if the killer enjoyed watching police struggle, and that terrified everyone. Because now, the murderer wasn't just hiding. He was playing games. As the investigation continued, dark theories started appearing everywhere. Some believed the killer had medical training because of how precise the injuries were. Others believed powerful people protected the murderer. And over time, the case only became more mysterious. Witnesses changed stories. Evidence disappeared. Potential suspects died unexpectedly. Years passed. Then decades. But still, no answers. Today, The Black Dahlia murder remains one of the most famous unsolved crimes in history. Books were written about it. Movies were inspired by it. And internet detectives still spend countless hours trying to solve the mystery. But perhaps the most disturbing part is the idea that the killer may have lived a completely normal life afterward. Walking through crowds unnoticed. Watching the news coverage. Knowing nobody could prove what he had done. And somewhere in the darkness of old Hollywood, the truth about Elizabeth Short may still remain buried forever. Imagine finally buying your dream house, a beautiful home in a peaceful neighborhood, a fresh start for your family. Then one day, you receive a letter from someone calling himself the Watcher. At first, the message seems strange, but not dangerous, until you realize the writer has been secretly watching your family, watching your children, watching your house. And somehow, he knows things nobody else should know. This terrifying real-life mystery began in Westfield, New Jersey. A couple purchased a large house they planned to renovate before moving in with their children. Everything felt perfect. The neighborhood was quiet. The streets were beautiful, and the house looked like something out of a dream. But shortly after buying it, the first letter arrived. It was addressed simply to the new owner. Inside, the writer welcomed the family to the neighborhood. But then, the tone changed. The letter claimed the house had been watched for decades. The writer said his own family had monitored the home for generations. And now, it was his turn. At first, the family thought it was some kind of prank. But days later, another letter arrived. This one was worse. The writer mentioned the family's children directly, asking disturbing questions, talking about young blood, and describing details about the house that terrified the parents, because whoever wrote the letters had clearly been watching them closely. The family contacted police immediately. Investigators checked fingerprints, interviewed neighbors, examined surveillance possibilities, but they found almost nothing. No clear suspect, no obvious explanation. Meanwhile, the letters kept coming. Some arrived by mail, others appeared unexpectedly, and each message made the situation more disturbing. The Watcher seemed obsessed with the house itself, almost like he believed it belonged to him. The family became terrified. They stopped sleeping comfortably. Every noise outside at night became suspicious. Every passing stranger felt dangerous. At one point, they became so paranoid they avoided letting their children play outside alone. And things only got stranger. Neighbors began acting suspiciously. Some people refused to talk. Others denied seeing anything unusual. Rumors spread throughout the town. Was the Watcher a neighbor? A former owner? Someone secretly living nearby? Or just a dangerous stalker obsessed with the house? The story eventually exploded online. Millions of people became fascinated by the mystery. Internet investigators searched through maps, photos, and neighborhood records trying to identify the writer. But nobody could prove anything. Years later, the mystery still remains unsolved. The family eventually sold the house after living in fear for years. But the terrifying question still remains. Who was the Watcher? And perhaps even more disturbing is the possibility that he may still be out there, watching another house, waiting for another family, and writing another letter. In the summer of 1912, a quiet American town became the location of one of the most horrifying murder cases ever recorded. A family of 6, along with 2 young guests, were brutally murdered while they slept. The killer moved silently through the house during the night, and even after more than a century, nobody knows who did it. This is the terrifying story of the Villisca Axe murders. Villisca, Iowa was a small, peaceful town. People trusted each other. Most families left doors unlocked at night. Violent crime was almost unheard of. That's why what happened on June 10, 1912, shocked the entire country. The Moore family spent the evening attending a church event. Later that night, They returned home with two young sisters who were staying over. Everything seemed normal. The children went to sleep. The house became quiet. But sometime after midnight, someone entered the home carrying an axe. The killer moved room to room in complete darkness. One by one, every person inside the house was murdered. Parents, children, guests. No one survived. The next morning, neighbors became worried when the family didn't appear outside. Eventually, someone entered the house. What they discovered inside was beyond horrifying. The crime scene shocked investigators. The murders were incredibly violent. And strangely, the killer appeared to spend time inside the home after the attacks. Curtains were covered. Mirrors were hidden. And certain objects inside the house had been moved. Police searched desperately for clues. But the investigation quickly became chaotic. Too many people entered the crime scene before evidence was secured. Important clues were accidentally destroyed. And rumors spread everywhere. Some believed a traveling serial killer committed the murders. Others suspected someone from inside the town. Several men were investigated. Some even confessed temporarily. But none of the confessions matched the evidence completely. As years passed, the mystery only became darker. People began reporting strange experiences inside the house, whispers at night, footsteps in empty rooms, shadowy figures seen near windows. Eventually, the house gained a terrifying reputation. Some people claimed it was haunted by the victims. Paranormal investigators later visited the location hoping to capture evidence of ghosts. And even today, many visitors still report frightening experiences there. More than 100 years later, the Villisca axe murders remain officially unsolved. The killer was never identified, never arrested, never punished. And somewhere in the silence of that old house, the mystery still remains waiting in the dark. In April of 1981, a small cabin hidden deep in the forests of Northern California became the scene of one of America's most disturbing unsolved murder mysteries. The crime scene was so brutal that even experienced investigators struggled to process what they were seeing. And decades later, many people still believe the truth was never fully revealed. This is the horrifying story of the Ketty Cabin murders. The Sharp family lived inside Cabin 28 in a small mountain community called Ketty. The area was quiet, isolated, and surrounded by forest. Sue Sharp lived there with her children. Friends described her as caring and protective. Nothing about the family seemed unusual. But during the night of April 11, 1981, something terrifying happened inside Cabin 28. The next morning, Sue's teenage daughter returned home after spending the night elsewhere. As she walked toward the cabin, something immediately felt wrong. The front door was open. Inside, the cabin looked destroyed. Furniture had been overturned. Blood covered parts of the room. And then, she saw the bodies. Sue Sharp, along with two other victims, had been brutally murdered inside the cabin. The scene was horrifying. Investigators later revealed the victims had been tied up and attacked violently. But the mystery became even stranger. One child was missing. 12-year-old Tina Sharp had vanished completely. At first, police feared she had been kidnapped by the killers. The investigation quickly exploded across California. Detectives searched forests, interviewed witnesses, collected evidence, and soon they realized this case was far more complicated than it first appeared. Some investigators believed multiple killers were involved. Others suspected people connected to the family. But despite possible suspects, the case became filled with confusion. Important evidence was reportedly mishandled. Certain witness statements changed over time, and some investigators later claimed crucial information was ignored completely. Years passed with almost no answers. Then suddenly, 3 years later, human remains believed to belong to Tina Sharp were discovered far away from the cabin. The discovery shocked everyone again. But even after that, the mystery still wasn't solved. Rumors spread everywhere. Some people believed police covered up mistakes. Others believed the killers were known locally but protected somehow. And because the case was never fully solved, the murders slowly became legendary in true crime history. Even now, decades later, people still visit the area searching for answers. The original cabin was eventually demolished, but many believe the darkness surrounding Cabin 28 never truly disappeared, because somewhere in the forests of Ketty, the full truth about that night may still remain hidden forever. So, which story disturbed you the most? Was it the terrifying elevator footage of Elisa Lam, the brutal mystery of the Black Dahlia, or the horrifying silence of Cabin 28? Comment below. And if you want a part 2 featuring even darker real-life horror cases, subscribe now before you forget. Because the scariest stories are the ones that actually happened.